Top 5 Most Shocking Wars in American History, the untold stories behind the battles. When most people think of American history, familiar names like George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, or the Revolutionary War come to mind. But beyond the polished pages of textbooks lies a much darker, more complex reality, one shaped by wars that were hidden, controversial, and in many ways deeply unsettling. In this article, we dive into 5 of the most shocking wars in U.S. history. These aren't just wars of military strategy or patriotism. They are wars filled with moral conflicts, buried truths, and lasting consequences. Some happened in secret. Some were public catastrophes. And all of them reveal a side of history that's often ignored. Number 5. Korean War, 1950 to 1953, the forgotten conflict that nearly went nuclear. Korean War is often overshadowed by World War II and Vietnam. Yet it remains one of the deadliest and most pivotal conflicts the U.S. has ever fought. Key facts: over 36,000 American soldiers died. It was the first military clash of the Cold War era. The war technically never ended. North and South Korea are still divided by a tense demilitarized zone, DMZ. The shocking truth. What many people don't know is that President Harry S. Truman considered using nuclear weapons, not once but twice. In the face of China's massive troop involvement, the U.S. military contemplated striking key areas with atomic bombs to halt the advancing communist forces. This came just 5 years after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, meaning the world stood on the brink of another nuclear disaster. Despite the scale of the conflict and its potential global implications, the Korean War is often referred to as the Forgotten War. Few Americans today know the full story, and even fewer understand how close the Cold War came to turning hot. Number 4. The Vietnam War, 1955 to 1975, a war fought at home and abroad. Vietnam is remembered not just for its jungle combat, but for the deep scars it left on American society. While over 58,000 American soldiers lost their lives, the true shock lies in what happened back home. Key facts: first war broadcast directly into American living rooms. Widespread protests erupted across the country. Massive government cover-ups came to light. The shocking truth. Perhaps the most explosive revelation came in 1971 with the Pentagon Papers, leaked documents that exposed how U.S. leaders knew the war was unwinnable for years, yet continued to send young men into combat. Returning soldiers were not treated as heroes, but instead met with protests, scorn, and indifference. For many veterans, the emotional wounds ran deeper than the physical ones, a betrayal by their own country. The Vietnam War transformed the way Americans viewed their government, their military, and their role in the world. Trust was shattered, and the psychological effects are still being felt today. Number 3. The War of 1812 to 1815, when America was nearly wiped off the map. Most people vaguely recall the War of 1812 as the time the U.S. fought Britain again. But the truth is far more alarming. The United States was nearly destroyed. Key facts: British forces invaded Washington, D.C. The White House, Capitol, and other federal buildings were set ablaze. America's future as an independent nation was in jeopardy. The shocking truth. During this brutal invasion, First Lady Dolly Madison famously rescued a portrait of George Washington as she fled the burning White House. But there's a silver lining in this dark chapter. It was during this war that Francis Scott Key wrote the Star-Spangled Banner, as he watched bombs burst in the air during the Battle of Fort McHenry. This anthem, born in chaos, would later define the American spirit. Despite its significance, the War of 1812 is often glossed over. Yet it was a defining moment that proved the U.S. could survive, even under fire. Number 2. World War II, 1939 to 1945, the global war with hidden crimes at home. World War II is often remembered with pride, the good war where America helped defeat tyranny and restore freedom. But beneath the surface of that narrative lies a disturbing truth. Key facts: Over 400,000 Americans died in the war. The U.S. played a crucial role in defeating Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. At home, Japanese Americans were placed in internment camps despite being loyal citizens. The shocking truth. One of the most unsettling facts? The U.S. government conducted secret mustard gas tests on its own soldiers, many of whom were African American, Puerto Rican, or Japanese American. These tests were intended to measure the effects of chemical weapons based on race, a horrifying practice that remained classified for decades. The soldiers involved were not given informed consent and were often denied recognition or compensation. These dark chapters challenge the simple narrative of American heroism and force us to confront uncomfortable truths about racism and human experimentation, even during a war that's widely celebrated. Number 1. The American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, a nation torn apart and still healing. The Civil War was the bloodiest conflict in American history. But it wasn't just a war between North and South, it was brother against brother, family against family, neighbor against neighbor. Key facts. More than 620,000 Americans died, more than in any other U.S. va. The war was fought primarily over the issue of slavery and states' rights. Entire towns were devastated. The Southern economy collapsed. The shocking truth. Children were forced to fight. On the Confederate side, boys as young as 12 and 13 were sent into battle. Many were untrained and unprepared, fighting a war they couldn't understand. Even after the war ended and slavery was abolished, the fight for true equality was far from over. Racism simply changed forms, through Jim Crow laws, segregation, and systemic injustice that lasted well into the 20th century. The Civil War may have ended on paper in 1865, but its legacy still shapes American society today, from racial tensions to cultural divides that remain unresolved. Conclusion. History isn't always what it seems. American history is often presented in neat timelines and patriotic soundbites. But the truth is much more complicated. These 5 wars show us that history is messy, painful, and full of uncomfortable realities. Whether it's a president considering nuclear war, a government deceiving its people, or the use of citizens in secret experiments, these stories matter. They remind us to look deeper, ask questions, and never accept the polished version of the past at face value.